the face, the only face, the real face of women's basketball, period. She did it again, Caitlin Clark, shattering records, creating new viewership.
The face, the only face, the real face of women's basketball, period. That is the claim being made before the real controversy even begins. Caitlin Clark did it again. Another record. Another surge of attention. Another moment that puts her at the center of the conversation. And that is exactly why what happens next carries a different kind of weight. Because this is no longer simply about what happens on the court. The story being presented is about what happens when the league's most visible star becomes connected to a controversy involving another player. Clark's influence is framed as something that reaches far beyond a single game. Her performances draw attention, her recognition generates discussion, and the audience surrounding her has become one of the biggest forces shaping the conversation around women's basketball. That is the foundation of the entire conflict. Before the controversy involving Sophie Cunningham is even fully explained, the viewer is asked to understand one central idea: Caitlin Clark is not being treated like an ordinary player in this story. Every statement carries more attention. Every controversy connected to her becomes larger. Every decision involving her has the potential to become a public debate. The transcript repeatedly frames that influence through records, viewership, Player of the Week recognition, and the reactions surrounding her games. Whether every dramatic claim about the league's dependence on Clark is proven is a separate question. But the scale of the conversation is undeniable within the story itself. The more attention Clark commands, the more powerful any controversy connected to her becomes. And that creates the question the rest of the story has to answer. What happens when a star with this level of attention is no longer simply breaking records, but becomes associated with a dispute over how another popular player is being treated? Because the moment Caitlin Clark enters that conversation, the issue stops being just about Sophie Cunningham. It becomes a test of how much influence one player can actually have. That is where Sophie Cunningham becomes the flashpoint. According to the transcript, Cunningham was allegedly caught in a dispute involving a restriction connected to the use of her name or likeness, with commentary describing the restriction as unfair and calling the situation absurd. But the source material does not independently establish every detail behind the restriction, so the confirmed event and the surrounding interpretation have to remain separate. What is clear from the transcript is the emotional reaction. Cunningham is presented as a popular, outspoken, hard-nosed personality whose appeal comes from feeling authentic to a significant part of the audience. The controversy therefore becomes larger than a technical rule or administrative decision. Supporters interpret the situation as another example of a league structure that may be disconnected from the players and personalities fans actually want to see. That interpretation is what turns the issue into a flashpoint. The debate is no longer simply about whether a specific restriction was allowed. It becomes a question of who gets to define what is acceptable, who has the authority to make that decision, and whether the rules are being applied in a way that fans consider fair. The transcript also shows how quickly the argument becomes connected to broader debates about identity, public perception, and the relationship between players and league institutions. Some of the strongest claims come from commentators and fan reactions rather than verified official statements, which makes the distinction important. The outrage is real as a public reaction, but the interpretation of what the controversy proves remains contested. And that is exactly why Cunningham becomes so important to the larger story. If this had remained an isolated disagreement involving one player, it might have disappeared into the daily cycle of sports news. But once fans began interpreting it as a question of fairness and institutional control, the controversy created a much bigger question: why would Caitlin Clark, the player at the center of so much attention, become connected to it at all? That is where the story makes its biggest leap. The transcript presents Caitlin Clark as allegedly moving beyond ordinary support for Sophie Cunningham and becoming a potential challenger to the league structure itself. The dramatic claim is that Clark demanded Cunningham's reinstatement and warned that the league could damage itself by continuing down the same path. But the source material requires an important distinction. The transcript presents this alleged ultimatum as a major event, yet it does not independently verify the exact source or context of the statement. The direct Clark interview included later in the transcript discusses her performance, effort, in helping her team win. It does not, within the provided material, directly confirm the alleged ultimatum. That distinction does not eliminate the power of the story. It explains why the claim became so explosive. If Clark really did publicly challenge the league over Cunningham, then the meaning would go far beyond one player's disagreement with an administrative decision. It would suggest that Clark was willing to use her visibility and influence to defend another player, placing her in direct tension with the institution surrounding the sport. That is the power move the narrative is built around. Clark is no longer simply the star being discussed by the league, the media, and the audience. She becomes someone whose position could potentially force the league to respond. The question is whether that influence is symbolic or whether it can create real consequences. Commentators in the transcript push the most dramatic interpretation, describing the alleged confrontation as a threat to the league's business model and institutional authority. Those claims remain commentary and speculation rather than confirmed consequences. But the reaction reveals why this moment became so important to the story. Because once Clark is connected to Cunningham's controversy, the central question changes. It is no longer only, was Sophie Cunningham treated fairly? It becomes, what happens when the most watched and discussed player in the story decides to take a position? That question becomes much bigger once the ratings enter the conversation. The transcript repeatedly argues that Caitlin Clark is not simply one successful player among many, but a major driver of attention. It points to strong viewership around games involving Clark and repeatedly returns to the idea that her presence changes the size of the audience watching. The important question, however, is what those numbers actually mean. Do viewers come primarily because of the WNBA as an institution? Because of a particular team? Because of the matchup? Or because they specifically want to watch Caitlin Clark? The transcript strongly favors the last interpretation, presenting Clark as the common denominator behind several of the highest-rated games discussed. That interpretation is central to the power debate. If the audience follows the individual star more than the institution, then a player's influence can extend beyond the court. The league may control the competition, the broadcast rights, and the official structure, but the star may control a significant part of the public attention. The transcript uses that idea to raise the stakes around the Cunningham controversy. If Clark's visibility attracts a large audience, then any position she takes can generate attention far beyond the original issue. A dispute involving one player can suddenly become a league-wide conversation because the person associated with it already commands enormous public interest. But the strongest version of that argument remains an interpretation, not something the transcript fully proves. High ratings around Clark's games demonstrate attention. They do not automatically prove that every viewer is there exclusively for Clark or that the league would collapse without her. The distinction matters because the entire power argument depends on how much of that audience truly belongs to the individual star. And that leads directly to the next question. If Caitlin Clark's influence is as large as the transcript suggests, does that give her real leverage over the league, or does it simply make every controversy surrounding her much louder? The controversy becomes more complicated when the question shifts from one dispute to the structure of the league itself. The transcript repeatedly returns to the idea that the WNBA has not fully established a clear hierarchy around its biggest stars. In the commentary surrounding the Indiana Fever, the debate is framed around whether the organization has clearly defined its pecking order and how different teams manage their most prominent players. That matters because star power creates a tension that institutions cannot completely avoid. A league needs rules, policies, and structures that apply beyond any one individual. At the same time, the most visible players can generate levels of public attention that make every decision involving them more consequential. The more popular a player becomes, the harder it is for the institution to control the conversation surrounding that player. This is where the Clark and Cunningham controversy becomes part of a larger debate. Supporters may see the situation as evidence that popular players should have more influence over decisions affecting their careers and public identities. Critics may see the opposite problem. A league cannot allow popularity alone to determine policy. Both positions create a genuine tension between institutional authority and public pressure. The transcript's most dramatic claims about sponsors, emergency meetings, boycotts, or the league potentially collapsing are not established as confirmed events by the source material. They function as commentary and speculation. But the underlying question remains powerful even without those claims. How does a league maintain authority when its most recognizable stars have audiences and public identities that extend far beyond the league itself? That is the pressure point beneath the entire controversy. The issue is no longer only whether Caitlin Clark supports Sophie Cunningham. It is whether the modern sports institution can remain in control of its own narrative when individual stars increasingly have the ability to create attention, shape debate, and bring millions of viewers into the conversation on their own terms. Once the controversy reaches the audience itself becomes part of the story. The transcript describes a growing public reaction around Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the league, with fans and commentators turning the dispute into a much broader debate about fairness, popularity, and institutional authority. But the reactions need to be separated from the confirmed events. The transcript presents social media activity, fan support, online criticism, and claims of organized viewing boycotts as part of the public response. Those claims are presented within the source, but the source does not independently verify the full scale of those reactions. What can be established from the transcript is that the controversy generated significant commentary and that viewers were encouraged to take sides. That polarization is what gives the story momentum. Supporters of Clark and Cunningham can interpret the situation as proof that popular players are being challenged by an institution that does not understand its own audience. Critics can interpret the same situation as an example of fans allowing individual popularity to overshadow league rules and broader institutional decisions. The debate becomes especially powerful because both sides are responding to the same central question: who should have the final say? The league has the authority to establish its policies. Players have their own reputations, identities, and relationships with the audience. Fans, meanwhile, can reward or punish decisions through attention, criticism, and the choices they make about what they watch. That is why public reaction becomes more than background noise. The audience is no longer simply observing the dispute. Through commentary, social media, and public debate, viewers help determine how large the controversy becomes. And if fans continue to choose sides based on their connection to individual stars rather than institutions, the next conflict may become even more difficult to contain. Because the future question is not just whether a league can control its policies. It is whether it can control the conversation once its biggest stars have audiences of their own. The bigger question is what this controversy actually represents. Is it evidence that Caitlin Clark has become powerful enough to challenge the institutions surrounding the sport, or has the story been amplified by commentators, fan interpretation, and the enormous attention already attached to her name? The confirmed elements of the story are narrower than the most dramatic claims. The transcript includes Clark's Player of the Week recognition, direct interview footage, discussion of her popularity and viewership, and extensive commentary about Sophie Cunningham and the controversy surrounding her. Beyond that, many of the largest claims about league panic, sponsor pressure, organized boycotts, or Clark personally threatening the entire league remain presented as commentary, interpretation, or speculation within the source. That distinction may ultimately be the most important part of the story. A star does not need to literally control an institution to change the balance of attention around it. If millions of people are already watching, debating, and reacting to everything connected to that star, then even a symbolic position can become a major public event. And that is why the Cunningham controversy may matter beyond the immediate dispute. It raises a question that future leagues and athletes will continue to face: how much authority can an institution maintain when its most visible players have independent audiences, independent brands, and the ability to shape public conversation without waiting for the institution to speak first? The answer is not settled here. The transcript presents a dramatic interpretation of a potential power shift, but the evidence and the speculation should not be treated as the same thing. What is clear is that Caitlin Clark's influence has made controversies connected to her impossible to treat as ordinary sports stories. So if another major conflict emerges, the question may be even bigger than what happened to one player. It may be whether the future of women's basketball is shaped primarily by the institutions that run the sport, or by the individual stars who increasingly command the audience watching it.